Sharp tools. That's what we're going to accomplish today. What's a good method for all-around sharpening when it comes to the workshop? It needs to be simple, repeatable, effective, and applicable to many different tools. I use my Tormek T-8, and I think it hits all those boxes. With the help of their jigs, you can sharpen most things. So let's put that to the test. I've got a variety of different hand tools. Let's do them all and go over setup, jigs, method, going from sharpening to honing. In other words, getting your tools really sharp. This is my T-8. I've had this machine for a couple of years. It comes with a trowel which you pour water in, so everything is sharpened through water, which keeps the metal cool. The original grindstone is standard. You can change the grit on that one with another stone. Last year, however, I upgraded to their diamond stones. I've got the coarse, fine, and very fine. And these you switch out as you go through with the grits. They're very effective. Today, however, I'm going to just use the fine stone, which I think is great if you're not dealing with super dull tools and you're not regrinding any bevels. And we're also not trying to go to like super fine levels here. We're trying to do a basic job of getting the tools sharp. Now I have their composite honing wheel, which doesn't require any paste, which is very efficient. Now, the machine on its own is great. However, what makes this very accurate and simple to use are all the jigs. And I'm going to go over my most frequently used jigs today. Many jigs are used for multiple types of tools, and they simply ensure that you hold the tool properly at the right angle, and they provide a lot of support. Sometimes you can sharpen things freehand without a jig. However, I almost always use them. Now, you can choose whether you want the wheel spinning towards you or away from you for the most part. I almost always have the wheel spinning away from me, as it provides less of a chance of anything getting caught. Some people claim it is less effective, but I think it's plenty effective for me, and it is safe and easy to do. Plus, I've just gotten used to doing it that way. I'd say the most frequently used jig is probably the SE77. And why is that? It's what you use for most chisels and plane blades. So first of all, we're going to put the support on top, and then the jig simply slides through the rod. Now, when you put your tool in, there's an edge right there, so you want to butt up against it, and that will keep the blade square. Then I'll tighten it, and now it's all about finding the right angle. I'm not redoing an angle here, I'm simply trying to sharpen the existing angle. And setting that up is all about a combination of how high the tool rest is mounted and how far down the blade is mounted in the jig. So that's what you want to see right there. And then it's simply a matter of moving the blade over the stone a couple of times, putting a bit of pressure on. You don't need too much. Now, the diamond stones are a little bit more effective than the original grindstone, but you know, after a while you kind of get a feel for how much you need to do. You can always mark the bevel before starting as well, just to make sure you sharpen it completely. I like to go through the motion a couple of times, then dry it off and hone the back of it freehand. Using the same jig for the chisel, and it's pretty similar. Obviously the chisel is longer, and I'm just keeping the tool rest at the same position while altering how far down I bring the chisel. And the main reason for moving is so that you wear the stone evenly. Now, the chisel is smaller than the plane blade, so if I put the same amount of pressure on it with my hand, I actually push down much harder on the chisel because the surface is smaller. And if you have a bunch of chisels to do, it's pretty quick work once you have it set up. And can you see that thin layer of steel at the edge there? See it? That's the burr, that's what you want to remove. Now, right along in the category of my chisels and plane irons, I would next sharpen my spoke shave blade. For that, we're using the SVD 110. A rather simple concept here. We basically have a flat support piece that we're sliding onto the rod, lowering it, and you can adjust the angle of it. And now I'm trying to find that perfect angle to sharpen the bevel on the blade. The spoke-shaped blade is so much smaller than the plane iron or the chisel, and you're simply holding it in your hands, resting it against the support. Then honing, and quite a lot of that fine burr came off. Tiny slivers of steel, see it? Now, this particular jig can also be used for a different tool, the cabinet scraper, one of my favorite simple tools in the shop. For this, we're going to put on the original grindstone because we're sharpening on the vertical side of the wheel. Then we're mounting the jig like this and placing the scraper on the bottom, pushing evenly against the sides of the stone, going over each side. Then flipping it around and doing the same on the other side. A bit of honing. And if you want the scraper to get super sharp at this point, you can clamp it in your workbench and use a hard steel rod or a burnishing tool to create a micro hook. But kind of a cool use. Okay, moving on to another jig I use quite frequently. That's because I use this one for knives primarily. However, let's actually start with sharpening a draw knife. Now, the draw knife is a tool I don't use all that frequently, but when I do, it's certainly nice if it's sharp. So we're moving the tool rest and putting it in the front. And this jig basically just clamps onto the back of whatever tool you're sharpening, be it a draw knife or a regular knife, you know, a chef's knife you can use. Then the jig leans onto the support, and here I realize it is so long I need to remove the honing wheel so as to not butt into it. Finding the angle and then slowly moving across. Since the tool rest is so long, you obviously have a lot of leeway here. And I hadn't sharpened this tool in a while. Now let's put the honing wheel back on. And again, doing it freestyle on the back, angling it to make it fit. Okay, now let's continue using this jig. We're going to add a support piece, the SVM00, because now we're sharpening my little carving knife. And the blade is so short, so it needs this extension piece which you connect to the main jig in order to work. Let's move the tool rest and go through the same motions. That's one thing you realize after a while, that while some of the jigs are a little different, it's all really the same in terms of finding the right angle, setting the support right, and then just running the machine. Now the next jig is a very simple yet effective jig. It's the SVA 170, and it's what you use to sharpen an axe, or in this case a hatchet. So we simply slide the jig onto the rod. I'm lowering the support a bit and then just fitting the back of the hatchet into the little section here. This is nice because it enables you to move at a curve, since most axes aren't straight at the blade, so you can move with the tool. And then honing. And honestly, a lot of the time you might be fine just doing honing on a tool, depending on how much it needs to be sharpened. So we have one last jig I want to cover today, and it's the SVX 150. Not a jig I use that often, but every now and then it's useful to have on hand because it sharpens scissors, the often forgotten tool most of us don't sharpen. These are my leather scissors. They do get dull, So for this jig we also need a support piece that we're sliding onto the rod. Then we're attaching one side of the scissor blades onto the jig, and it's nice how you don't have to disassemble the scissors. Then leaning against the support, finding the angle and start sharpening. And then we are turning it around and sharpening the other side of the blade as well. And sometimes the angle on the two blades are different, so you may need to adjust it when doing the second one. And when you haven't sharpened your scissors in a while, it's a nice surprise to see just what a difference it makes. Now the thing about scissors is you don't need to hone them. In fact, they probably work better if you don't. So we're done. These were my most frequently used jigs using my Tormek. Sure, there are others I use quite a bit too, to sharpen gouges and turning tools, but those are for another time. Let me know how you sharpen your tools and if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching.